Good evening. Welcome to the Wednesday, March 19th Rockport School Committee meeting. This meeting is being recorded for audio and video. For the record, let's go around the table and introduce ourselves, please.
June Sanfilippo, Business Manager.
Mark Lorenz, Committee Member.
Nicole Altieri, School Committee Vice Chair.
Kathy Riley, School Committee Chair.
Good evening, Mark Branco, Superintendent.
Amy Oakes, School Committee Member.
Jessica DeLisi, School Committee Member.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the first order of business is, has everybody had a chance to read the minutes from the March 5th meeting? Any questions or comments? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Second? Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any public comment tonight as I look at the two public people? Okay. Dr. Branco, any correspondence?
None at this time.
Any donations?
None at this time.
Any personnel?
None at this time.
Okay. Any, there's no student advisory committee rep here, but does anybody want to share success from the school?
So our jazz band was awarded I'm riffing, but luckily the department head's in the seat. They were awarded a bronze medal, I believe, at the MIAJE, the Massachusetts Jazz Educators Association festival recently. I think the middle school is prepping a musical that's coming to fruition very soon. Not a musical, but a play. That's okay, a play. So we have a show coming up. We have an award-winning jazz program. The Choral Festival was magnificent a week ago, if you were able to come to the Choral Festival. And a giant thank you to the Ed Foundation for putting on a really nice gala to raise funds. We are constantly thankful for their support and the philanthropy that comes in from the community. And spring sports are underway. I could see them in the freezing cold weather wearing hats and gloves on the tennis court today. So tomorrow's the first day of spring, and we're excited about the change of the season.
I didn't know it was the first day of spring tomorrow. Suddenly I feel so much better. I feel so much more hopeful. Oh, it was a rough day.
Since Mr. Cohen is here,
Yeah.
would the chair be willing to entertain a motion to take 10A out of order?
Yes. To run through the motion?
Sure.
Okay. Can we have a motion to take new business 10A out of order so that Mr. Cohen can present and leave before all the subcommittee reports?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thanks, Nathan.
So all you have to do is tell me when you want me to slide from slide to slide for you.
Thanks so much. I am presenting a proposed music performance tour to Croatia, Slovenia, and with a day trip to Bosnia for April 2027. I've been in the music department long enough that this would be our fourth international trip. We took a trip to Ireland in 2014 and then to Austria and the Czech Republic in 2018, and then to Italy in 2023. And so the idea is that we space them every 4 years so that we can give every student who goes through 4 years at Rockport High School the opportunity to go on one of these trips. There's a lot of fundraising involved, so we spread them out so that it's doable and approachable. And the destination proposed for the next one is Croatia. We can slide on down. So these are all in the Balkan Peninsula. There's wonderful connections. Musically, Balkan music is rich with folk music, but there's a lot of classical connections as well. There's really interesting history with the Roman and Venetian history that is extended down in through that coastline. So there's a lot of interdisciplinary connections and musical connections. We can keep cruising. I'll show you the itinerary. So this would be, the students would miss the Friday half day. We would fly overnight flight on Thursday of April vacation in 2027, arriving in Dubrovnik, which you might recognize pictures of. That is King's Landing from Game of Thrones. That first day, everybody's usually pretty sleepy, and so we have an orientation day, a safety day, protocol day. There's some opportunity to explore. And then we get into some of the structured tours. So there's 3 performances. Part of the tour and part of what makes this particular tour expensive is that we are hiring a moving van for instruments. Large instruments are rented. There is 3 different venues that are rented, and there's promotion. The tour company that we work with is a subsidiary of ACIS, so they have a huge network. But this company that we're working with is called Encore Tours, and they are the performance-specific branch of that tour. And so they have networks, so they guarantee audiences. So from a student perspective, they are working really, really hard because they're putting together, the music is, it's a little different than playing at Rockport High School when you're performing to an international audience, but then they have an audience that shows up that is really engaged and really supportive, and they tailor the marketing to the ensemble, so there's a lot of back and forth about that. So in Dubrovnik is our first performance, and then we make our way up the coast to Split, but instead of a straight shot, we're going to go up and cross over into Bosnia to Mostar, which is this really beautiful town in the upper left. And if you go to the next one, there's a full picture of, at one point, we were entertaining a tour that included Sarajevo, and the price was $1,000 higher, and we've done a lot of making this approachable. Keep going. So then we end up in Split, Croatia, where we're going to do another combination of sightseeing and performing. This one, I believe they've already locked in the performance site. It would be the Domnius Cathedral. There's a tour of Diocletian's palace. Diocletian was a 4th century AD Roman emperor, and that is... I'm very excited to learn a lot about the history there, too, as we go. This next town is called Zadar, and Zadar has a sea organ. The upper left photo is a boulevard, and it's sort of, if you can imagine, wind chimes, but with water. So the boulevard actually has different length pipes built into the boulevard, so as the water comes in and out, it pushes sound in and out. It's sort of enchanting to me, as if I don't know if I'd like to live there on the boulevard, but this isn't a clickable thing, right? Where it says "watch here." This is a PDF I sent you? Yes. No clicking. Okay, yeah. This is the exact same slideshow that we shared with parents, and so there were some interactive pieces there, but keep going. And then we make our way up to Slovenia. And we are stopping at Plitvice National Park, which is on the next slide. Rainbows guaranteed. This national park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Several of the places that we're going are. The kids saw a photo of that and were like, "Oh, I'm so excited to swim there." And there may be some swimming on the trip, but not there. That's 60 degrees or so is the. And yeah, exactly, right? They're raised in the Atlantic. And then we go to Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia. It's sort of considered the Salzburg of the south there. And we're based in Ljubljana for a couple of days. The final performance there, we're in conversations with the tour company about having that one perhaps be a joint concert with local high schoolers. So there would be an opportunity to make some connections there. And then the last day, so the final performance would be the penultimate day of the trip, and then we would have one more day to sort of have a nice trip out to this gorgeous Lake Bled, and then there's a boat trip out to an island where there is a church and a castle and some hiking, and then the celebratory farewell dinner. The plan is to have a local folk group come and perform, so the farewell dinner would actually be kind of a local folk-inspired party. So that is the hope and the plan, and I think, there's some curricular connections. Balkan folk music is really, really interesting and wonderful. We have the woman in this photo is named Vesela Stoyanova, who is Bulgarian. She's not Croatian or Slovenian, but she teaches she runs the Berkeley Contemporary Balkan Ensemble at Berkeley, and she and I have been talking a little bit. She's really interested in helping make some arrangements of Balkan music for the students and make some of the cultural nuances. Really, there's a lot about Balkan politics and history that are subtle and complicated, and I would really love for the students to have an opportunity to understand that before they go. Every time I present one of these trips, the price always feels really high, and then the next time I present, I look back at the last one and I say, do you remember how affordable that seemed? This is the highest iteration of the price. I was really insistent with the tour company that we disclose that. Depending on the numbers of people who come, the price can come down a little bit. We're 2 years out, so thing number one is that there's a lot of fundraising opportunities between now and then. We're really committed to the idea that any student who would like to attend this trip can do that. There's enough time to fundraise at school concerts, to work, to give us time to find some scholarship money, which we are doing. There's sort of 4 tiers of fundraising already in the works. I have a cheat sheet. Depending on the actual number of attendees, the price shifts a little bit. Its most expensive iteration is down right around 40, which is this price. And at 50, it drops to 64. At 60, it jumps back up because we would actually need a second bus at that point with a second driver. And if we can get 70 people, which is my personal goal, we'll see, we haven't brought that many people in the past, the price drops down to $6,300. For context, I'll come back to context in a second. We can keep cruising. We had a representative from Encore Tours at the presentation we made at the school a few weeks ago. Usually we would present at school committee first before telling the parents this might exist. And I was talking with Dr. Branco a couple months ago about trying to find a meeting to present this at. And he said, go ahead and start talking to parents and then bring it around. But that's why things are a little bit out of order there. So we had a representative from Encore Tours who was talking about the protection plans, and we can cruise through this a little bit. There is some really good protection with no extra money. The students have an opportunity to purchase, I think it's $50 a day for an extra protection plan, so they have up until the last minute to figure out if it's really a go for them. We can keep cruising. Cancellation coverage exists. We can keep going. And then there's some fundraising support. They give us two tours this time around to raffle off to Paris or London, winner's choice. And so we're able to raffle one off in December at the high school winter concert next year, and then another one the following year. This is a slide from the tour company that past groups have raised over $30,000. We were that past group when we went to one of our years. It was the year we went to Austria. And so we raffle off tickets at school concerts, but we also make the tickets available directly to the students so that they can go out and do a lot of independent fundraising that way. And then these are slides about fundraising. So there's school concerts coming up. We got a permit from the town to do 50-50 raffle tickets at the concerts, but we're also trying to do a lot of things where we're empowering the students through music. I mean, part of this is, it's an experience, but also we're trying to really get the students working in music. So we're all putting together gig packets to try to get the kids inspired to make music, share music with the community, busk on Bearskin Neck, set up shop. There's a garden tour happening. They've reached out where we have some kids who've signed up to do music there. There's a May Day festival happening at Whistle Stop Mall. We're hoping to have some kids making music there. But every time we do this, it sort of raises the bar. The kids take their music seriously, but also we're hoping to give them lots of opportunities to have all these different threads come together on their own terms. talked about this a little bit. Encore is they've got an enormous network. There's a lot of backup in case something goes wrong because they're under this much larger umbrella. And I think we can zoom to the end. There we go. That slide right there. Price comparison. Just New York City, we paid. That was a different era, a different time. That was me and Mrs. Pike putting things on our credit cards, and then deciding we would never do that again. And then it was 2014, which that trip was $4,000, which felt like an enormous amount then. The trip to Austria was $5,000, and then the trip to Italy was around $5,400. But we made the mistake of forgetting to include the instrument rentals for the large instruments, which the music department was fundraising for separately. And so had that been included, it would have been about $5,600. So we're in line with those prices with this. Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit, you and I had conversations about how the caveat is the hustle, right? So
Yeah.
generally speaking, historically, with the past 2 or 3 expensive trips, if a student fully participates in the fundraising and commits to having a part-time job and doing a little bit of work, that roughly speaking, they can knock the cost down to about 50% if they're really, really hustling.
Yeah.
So I think that's what people need to know. You know, you're looking at a trip that's pretty costly in general, but that, historically here, the music department pushing out things, some of the philanthropic organizations supporting us, and then the student themselves hustling with part-time jobs and fundraising, it is possible to knock the price in half.
Yeah, we've had several students, and your son, right, paid for,
The whole thing.
the whole thing,
The whole thing.
with a job.
Yeah.
And so I've had several parents who had kids on the last trip say, yeah, my kid got a job and paid for the entire thing himself.
Yeah.
The number that has been kicked around from former students who have fundraised just at school concerts and events have made around $1,500 in the little bits of money that comes in here and there. Colleen Coogan, former school committee member, made a comment the last time I presented pre-Italy that she said, the piece that the trip itself was, a lifetime incredible experience for the kids, and she said, but as a parent, the thing that unexpected was even better than that for me was watching my kids take this piece seriously and start organizing and taking financial responsibility and going to their neighbor and looking them in the eye and explaining what they're doing and representing the school in that piece too. So hopefully we can help amplify that element.
So we'll open it up for questions, thoughts, comments.
I would just say, like Nathan said, my son went on the Italy trip, and I would say that I agree with what Colleen said, and I really love the part of empowering students to use music. So there's these 2 years of sort of build up to this trip where they're taking on sort of doing these different things, these different gigs, and even if you couldn't, even if you need your part-time job for other things, let's say, I think the focus on, us supporting students in doing these things is just as impactful as the trip itself. And I think Rockport's commitment to making sure that every student that wants to go on this trip can go is also really important. Aside from it being a life-changing experience, to be able to perform in these places is just amazing. In Italy, they performed in the Carrara marble quarries, and it was just amazing. So to see this is great, but I think that piece is important, that anyone who wants to go will be able to go.
That was going to be my question. So when you say anyone, they don't have to be part of the music program?
They do have to be a member of band, orchestra, or chorus. And so, but those ensembles are open to anybody. And so we've actually started talking at some of the assemblies, sharing that this is a possibility, and there's still an opportunity to join those ensembles. So it's
That's what I was going to say. So if a student were to see this, they could say, wait a minute, I'll join chorus if I get the opportunity to do something like that. Okay, cool.
And chorus seems like the easiest of those maybe to start because we all have a voice. I had a student in it was 2014, 2015. Freshman came to me and said, I kind of feel like I missed the boat, but is it too late to play cello? And he was on the 2018 tour with us as a senior and just an incredibly strong player. He started in 9th grade. So I think music is hard. It's supposed to be hard. And we invite students to come and challenge themselves.
If I'm a 7th grader right now, in 2 years I'll be a 9th grader.
Yep.
Would I be allowed to go on the trip?
Yes.
So as a 7th grader, will I be invited to fundraise with the rest of the students?
Yes. I think the toughest financial burden is on the 7th graders because not all of them are old enough to get a job.
Right.
And so in part, that's why we're also going after larger chunks of money from institutions going after. It seems aggressive. We are in pursuit of. We are seeking a scholarship fund, so that especially for families who have more than one kid, especially for families who already have kids who are working and they're helping to pay the bills in their family, that there is money to help those students as well. Yeah.
I'm sure all of you already know this, so forgive me, but if I had a student with a physical disability, would my child be able to go to these places in a wheelchair or in? Okay.
There
Thanks.
are likely in Europe, I think it would be site by site dependent. If the site itself is not wheelchair accessible,
But the
there
tour
would be an
company,
adjustment.
the tour
The
company,
tour company
has provisions and sets
accommodates.
up-
They're aware
Yeah.
of that. They've
Yeah.
thought that through, certainly.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any student who can attend a field trip can attend this trip.
Thank you.
Yep.
I had a question about what's included from the tour company. And
Sure.
I feel like we've asked this in previous trips, but I can't remember the answer.
Yeah.
So I saw the liability protection is included. But
The-
is there an
Yeah.
emergency medical coverage
Yes.
as part of it?
Yeah. Can you, let's stay on this page for a second.
Yep.
Thanks. So I would need to look at, they do have a page that has a included, not. So they have the 3 tiers of insurance. The basic insurance, in terms of if somebody gets sick or hospitalized, they're on top of it and they pay a stipend. They're
Right.
yes. The answer to that is yes. The advanced protection plans are really they're really geared towards letting people back out of the trip up to 3 or 4 days before. Some of the if you go with the basic, you're protected as a human. But if you don't have that and you back out of the trip before, I think it's 90 days or 100 days, something like that, you forfeit some money. It includes airfare. All their hotels are centrally located so that if you're out with your group, you can walk to safe, interesting places. There's a tour guide and a driver per bus. There's a cargo van with drivers and roadies for the concerts. All the entrance fees, all the taxes, all the gratuities. The coach buses are very nice. Venue rentals and promotion and instrument for the large instruments. There's promotion for the concerts. Local city guides where applicable. Liability coverage in excess of 50. I never know what liability coverage means in this, to be honest, in this broad term. And then most of the dinners, breakfasts everywhere, lunches are usually on their own, and then some of the dinners the kids are going to be in groups, sort of in a local area, having dinner on their own. When we did the Ireland trip, every second of every day was planned to the teeth, and as a younger teacher, I thought that was really important. And then I realized, doing this subsequently, that having some structured independent time where the kids can safely explore, that's often the most valuable growth place. And also, I didn't have an also. Yeah, it's a huge point of growth. So there's a little bit more space in this trip for some, I think there's 4 dinners that the kids are going to seek on their own.
How many chaperones do you take?
It depends on the number of
Yeah.
kids. For this trip, it's priced at 10 students to 1 chaperone.
One. Thank you.
when we get close to the trip, the music department may pay to add a chaperone, depending on needs of students and things like that.
You know, and I think when we talk about value added opportunities, yes, there's a substantial price tag to this particular value add, but the fact that the music department and Mr. Cohen work as hard as they can to help families knock this down, to recognize which families need it knocked down in a certain way, is really important to me. And as a recovering music teacher, it's been almost 40 years since I was a junior in high school and went to Austria and Germany on one of these trips as a student. And it was kind of those experiences that like validate you, you know, and make you realize even if you don't study music. I used to say when I was teaching, my job isn't to make everybody go to Berkeley or North Texas State or Juilliard, but my job was to create the next consumer of fine arts so that we're not closing down museums and we're keeping concert halls open, and you don't mind spending $10 down at the Crow's Nest or the Cut or anywhere else on a local band, you know, paying for NPR and going to museums. So to me, the value added for as far as creating whole human beings is really important, and not every school district has staff members that will go above and beyond to this extent. This is a full-time job by itself. Forget about the job that he and his colleagues already have.
Sorry, I just want to go again off of what Amy was asking. So it's every 4 years you're trying to do it, so that, and then so students that their only opportunity might be like their freshman year, they're told as early as 4 years before that, like their parents are kind of given a heads up that early to start thinking about. Okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
those seventh grade parents.
Yeah, you already
had
held that
already been
meeting.
in this conversation.
Yeah. That's why it was important to me. So I had met with Kathy ahead of time in our pre-planning meeting, just to say every extra week we wait to put this out there puts us behind the eight ball for planning. So we talked about just letting him at least get in front of the parents, and then us having a question and answer time tonight for approval after. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking like as a parent of young kids, and I'm like, well,
You're starting to do the math
what
now.
year would this end up falling on for when my kids get to high school? And I just think that like maybe
Yeah.
it's something we could talk to even as early as like late elementary, so that parents are aware that this once in a lifetime opportunity is going to come up, and when it's going to come up in their students' high
Yep.
school career.
That's a great
Would be
idea.
important.
Great content for the loop. In the loop.
Well, and I think it's legendary. Like, you know, when you're even in elementary school, like you see the fundraising and, oh, they're going to, and it is one of those things that keeps a kid who might be on the edge involved in high school or involved in senior year when she's just like, I can't do anything else. This trip is very much a motivator to stay involved. Not that music itself isn't, but sometimes you need a little extra oomph, and it really does keep. So a lot of the parents already know like about this.
So I do know tonight we'll just need a motion to approve the music department trip.
I'll make that motion to approve the music department trip as presented to Croatia.
Second.
Hey, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you all so much.
Have fun. Thank you for doing this. So now we will,
So
do you
yeah.
want to go back up to 8?
Yeah, so let's go back to subcommittee updates. Policy subcommittee is quickly trying to get our schedule together, Mark, so if you want to give a quick update on that, that'd be great.
So we have one section left, and we have 2 meetings scheduled coming up in April. So I think 2 meetings in the first week of April, I think is the way it works. In those 2 meetings, we're hoping to make progress through that last section. If we need it, we have a 3rd meeting tentatively scheduled, also in April. So our goal is by, I think it's the first meeting in May, that we have that available to do our review of that as a full committee. So tonight we're doing a first read, I believe.
Yep.
Do you want to
So I,
Do you want to project each section?
I don't
or
think
do you
so.
think just
So
ask questions?
I think we could do questions. So on your agenda, so if you remember from our last meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a slide that asked you to take a look at the notes, take a look at the packet. I will continue to operate the way I have been operating. I've been chipping away at a certain amount of policies every day in my office, just doing a much closer read. So if for some reason you get an email from me with updates, just keep your eye on the updates. But generally speaking, what we'd like tonight is a first read on policy. If you look at the agenda, policy KBF, first read on the clean version of section E, first read on clean version of section G, with the exception of those listed GBED, GBEE, GBGE, and GCRD, and then a first read on section I, and that first read is based on the fact that you've had them for a couple weeks and had a chance to look at it. So before someone makes the motion, if you don't mind, just if anybody has any questions or thoughts on these.
Just for the benefit of folks who might be watching at home, Dr. Branco, please remind everybody what the process is. First read, second read, what does all this stuff really mean?
So the subcommittee has spent time in their meetings working with an MASC, Mass Association of School Committee Representative, to go through our policies, look at best practices across the state, and come up with recommended changes or additions. The policy subcommittee has then made recommendations to move them forward to this committee. This committee has had a couple weeks to review, and then they do, by practice, what's called a first read, which means you're going to approve it tonight as a first read. That still gives the committee, between now and the next meeting, and me, quite honestly, one more opportunity to take a quick look with the consultant's help to make sure that we're really kind of fine-tuned everything. And then at the second read, which will be the next meeting, they'll be accepted in form to be moved forward for our final meeting of the year. Thank you.
And at that final meeting of the year, we'll be approving
The entire book.
the entire policy manual
Yep.
as one whole
Yep.
package.
So this was awesome to have the clean because I had the screen open looking at the notes and then you could look at the clean. So that was really great to have to be able to go back and forth. My question is there were some, and most of them I didn't really have a question on, but there were some where the note sort of said committee should discuss. So are we, okay, so that
Yep.
was for you
Yep.
guys to discuss
Yep.
and then you kind of made
Yep.
the corrections. Okay.
So the consultant was great. She went through every single policy and she said to us, your policy matches the MASC policy exactly. I recommend you do nothing. Or your policy is close, but here are some changes. Or you should really discuss this one because your policy is different, or you have a policy that doesn't exist at the MASC level, and you might want to think about where that came from and why you have that and whether that's actually necessary anymore. So she was invaluable helping us understand what are we doing going through these. Otherwise, this would have taken I cannot imagine. I mean, I would imagine we would have done one section a year, and we'd have a rotating system where, in 2027 we'll be doing Part C, and in 2028 we'll do Part D, and then we'll do Part E, and it would take forever. So those are her notes to tell us.
Right.
Yes, you subcommittee probably want to look at this one.
Well, and that's exactly what we did. It was never ending. It was never ending policy review. And therefore, because it never ended, it never felt complete. It never felt, it felt like it was.
Well, and it's confusing for users to understand which part is under review this year and which are the parts that are not. I think it's hard on this system.
Yeah, one of the conversations I had with a colleague of mine in another district is at the front of the policy book, or even as a separate hyperlink on the website where the policy link is, to have some kind of statement that just talks about this policy book had been reviewed over an 18-month period during such and such a date, and that moving forward, it will be reviewed upon recommendation of MASC as applicable laws or practices change at the state or local level. And then if, let's say, we came together as a subcommittee as necessary to update 3 in a particular calendar year, those 3 would then get added to that new cheat sheet, so to speak, to let the public know that those are the 3 new ones.
And that's probably way more meaningful when you take it in very small bits and you do it in response to a change at the state level. I think that's a much better conversation, and it helps people understand what's really happening at the state level. And it helps, it's not like drinking from a fire hose.
Right.
So.
Okay, well, the first question I have, and it's probably basic, so I'm going to ask a very basic, dumb question, so everybody else can feel free to ask a dumb question. I went through the electronic policy, I went through the paper policy, and I did not find KBF.
So it's in last week's folder from policy. So in your last week's slide deck where you had all the directions,
Okay,
that slide deck told you to look at that folder.
look at the folder.
Yeah, so if you
which-
go, I could do
help
it on,
me.
I could do it on screen. So if you go back into the school committee, sorry.
You have to
Yeah.
dig around.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry.
I'll go back for you just to show.
to go into the
You know where it
policy
is.
subcommittee folder?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. If you go into school committee,
policy.
policy subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because it's one of the very last ones that we did.
3.5, going to 3.5, is that what you're saying?
Yep, and then you'll see the class size policy that we discussed
Mhm.
on camera, and then you'll see the parent advisory council one as well in there.
Okay, great, thank
And
you.
really, because Alicia, our rep, is working hard with other school districts. We're in the middle of superintendent searches. That's why we've been disconnected for schedule the past couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I have not been able to give her the updates from class size, parent advisory, and a couple others that we have had hot off the presses. They haven't made it into the hyperlinked version yet.
Mm-hmm.
So once her and I connect and she has a moment to breathe in the other districts, I'll get some of these cleaned up and hyperlinked.
Okay,
And I'll shoot an email out to the committee to let you know that the cheat sheet with the hyperlinks is all cleaned up again. If you like the hard copy, then we could also have Amanda just run copies of 3 or 4 and just have them for you to add to your book.
So, however, anybody would
Yeah,
like to do that.
however you guys like it, yes.
I think it would be great for us to produce hard copies of the miscellaneous and then of the last section that we're just about to start, so
Yep.
people really have the whole book in front of them. I think so.
That works.
Do we want to run through each section and see if anybody has questions for each section?
However you like. Yeah.
Okay. So that was my big question about KBF. How about section E? Does anybody have a question or comment they would like covered this evening?
I'm just looking at the table of contents. There weren't too many major updates in this particular section. Emergency plans get changed every year. Recycling policy was done a year ago, I believe. So the majority of these were either minor changes or Rockport accepted in this particular section. And then if you move on to G, just a reminder that we had already approved 4 of them.
I had one question, and it is not about the policy itself, but it does mention in GCBB, it is employment of principals. And in the final paragraph, it mentions that the goals of the school committee and the directives of the superintendent and annually must submit with the school council the educational goals and school improvement plan.
Yep.
Is there a school,
The school improvement plan is the second and third page of the strategic plan, the
Okay.
SDI.
Who is the school council?
We have a school council at each school.
So that's the individual, like middle school, high
There's a
school,
middle high school school council, and then there's an elementary school council
And
that has
is
parent
like-
representatives.
and town representatives
Yep.
and school representatives, that
Yep.
council.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
In section E, I'm trying to like follow the yellow brick road here, so maybe Amy or Mark, you can help me out. So previously, policy EGAF was telephones and personal communication devices, and it was the where and when students can have and use personal electronics. That was EGAF, and it said, the note said, it's an RPS only policy and more appropriate for section I in conjunction with acceptable use policy. But then when I went to the acceptable use policy in section I didn't see any of that. Are we saying maybe that the use of phones and where and when is more of a handbook thing?
Yeah, it's not, most school districts aren't treating it as policy anymore because it depends on, some school districts have bring your own device policies. Some school districts issue Chromebooks like we do. Some have a hybrid where you can bring your own device. And so if you put a policy in place, it's kind of difficult to be fluid with that. So we're having this conversation right now. They've actually already changed. If you remember last year, the middle high schools already changed their cell phone policy. And by all accounts, I have a teacher nodding, and by all accounts, it's going pretty well. And I think we've seen a cultural shift in our classrooms already this year.
So
Those
we
are
will-
practices that happen in the handbook. And so when Amy comes forward with handbook changes or any of those kind of things, you'll hear about those at that point.
So Mask is recommending that schools no longer have a phone use policy.
Yeah. Because it's not in the United States, we call it a phone.
Right.
Right, but it's a mobile. I mean, really, it's a computer in your pocket at this point. And so it depends. Some school districts are piloting pouches where they turn the phone in at the beginning of the school day. The kid never sees it until the end of the day. Some aren't addressing them at all. And we're trying to stay ahead of the curve as far as best practices goes.
I think they're saying you will have a policy, and what we're saying is the policy is the superintendent and his staff will develop procedures every year and will report out about them and make sure the staff is involved and the students know. I think what we did throughout this work, at the advice of our consultant, was we removed language that really was procedure. And there were some policies that were many, many paragraphs of outdated procedures, right, which really belong in a procedure manual. Just a really simple example would be something perhaps maybe like the handling of petty cash, right? There is a procedure for the handling of that, but it probably wouldn't appear in the board policy manual. And so we took a lot of those procedures out, entrusting the superintendent. The policies say the superintendent is responsible with his staff to develop the procedure.
And it says that, is that in the acceptable use
It's in two
policy?
places. If you look
Okay.
at IJNDB, that's the technology integration and education and instruction. That's the policy that recognizes that in today's world, we need to integrate technology and tools. And then the next policy, IJNDC, is acceptable use of digital resources. And you can argue that it's difficult to use digital resources without a device. And how we decide which device is that's an instructional practice, an instructional decision.
And because when I looked at those, I just didn't see, I noticed it says the superintendent and the director of technology shall develop and implement appropriate procedures with guidance to digital resources. I just didn't see the principals involved anywhere, and there are other administrators, and that was my question, like with the principals, and does it need to be part of our policy that the principals will be, along with superintendent, will be involved in that, or
I
is
think
that?
there's an assumption that there's a trickle down in the leadership. Yeah. It's almost like,
It's make me nervous.
and all things.
What? Can you tell me the alphabetical reference that you're looking at, Nicole?
I was just looking at the one Mark was saying, access to digital resources. I'm sorry, IJND. I can't, I was totally not answering your question, Amy. So that says the superintendent in conjunction with the director of technology, which makes sense.
That means we create them, right? But then every staff member who works with us is responsible for enforcement. That's not policy, that's practice.
The other thing I would say about this policy is it also applies to staff. So when you go
Right.
down in this policy, it's not just students who will sign an appropriate digital use form. Staff will agree to and sign an appropriate digital use form. So this is for everybody in the system. If that helps.
Okay.
And again, I think we've had lots of conversations in the subcommittee, the difference between policy and practice and procedure. Practice and procedure is implementation of policy. That doesn't get listed in the policy. Principals, teachers will be responsible for ensuring that students.
Right, but the policy, what I'm just not seeing And I'm willing
I
to
mean,
let this go. It's
yeah.
not a hill I want to die on, but
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing in the policy that principals or teachers, not the teachers would be involved in making that procedure necessarily, but I'm not seeing the principals anywhere in there. And so that was something I was questioning.
Right, that the principals are
Would
not
make this policy. We don't
involved
not
in-
to
Won't
say
make
what
this
it is.
policy.
Well, they won't work with the superintendent to create the policy. No.
So,
Not the policy.
Procedure. I'm sorry.
Procedures.
To create
Yeah.
the procedure. I'm
Procedure and
using
the
the wrong
handbook.
word.
yeah, so we're in charge of it, and we're going to do it inclusively with teacher leaders, staff leaders. I don't think that would be you dictating the practice to us, I guess.
Okay.
I think that's why it's not
Well,
spelled out.
I think we see sometimes two different phrases. Sometimes you see this phrase, the superintendent or his or her designee.
Yeah.
And those are the things where a superintendent could ask a director of student services to put together the policy, to put together the procedure that would bring us into compliance with whatever the topic is. But then I think there might be tasks in a school system that the superintendent does and brings it to the school committee because it's also an HR task that applies to all employees. And so I think that the superintendent would talk to the principals about how to administer a code of conduct, but the code of conduct is probably based on state law, and we probably don't go to principals to ask them for a whole lot of input on what to do about some of those policies because we're following the laws on those policies. So I don't think we tried to leave people out of decisions. I think we tried to figure out where are the times when the superintendent must do it, and then where are the times when a superintendent would delegate it to somebody else.
And remember, when ed reform hit in '93, just for ed history, right, that it was site-based management in Massachusetts as far as building management goes. There are certain things at the district level that don't fall under ed reform in '93 as far as what principals can be and can't be in charge of. So I don't hire teachers, for example. I sign off, the principals make the recommendations. But in this case, somebody, because the principals work for the district, somebody has to be on the hook for being at the top of this. And the best practice coming from MASC is that it's the superintendent in conjunction with the director of technology.
And this, I guess I was specifically speaking to the use of mobile devices in schools by students. That's what I was kind of specifically
So
speaking
that's a
to.
district-wide decision anyway. Here it is.
And I think it's assumed that the superintendent would be working collaboratively with
Right.
the administration team in all these things. And so I don't think it needs to be spelled out
I
specifically.
mean, just
And
to,
if it's
just to give you a non-phone answer, I'm not micromanaging or even paying attention to the hallway passing practices or, how many kids are allowed to go into a bathroom at one time. Like, that's all operational. That's at the principal and assistant.
And I think it
principal
also goes
teacher
back
level.
to the review of the superintendent. If you found out the superintendent wasn't working collaboratively with the administration
right,
team, that
right.
I think there's a different process for that than having it spelled out in a certain specific policy
It's just
section.
it's a big change because we used to have this big policy about it, and now we're
Right.
going to no policy. So it was a significant change.
And I think
so
that
I
was
just
kind of a
thought
theme,
that
and
it
like
worked.
Amy said, a lot of the policies we were getting rid of the procedures, and also some of the sections there was a lot of wording that went on and on and on and on, and so it got really. Sometimes it was almost a circle. You read it and you just find yourself going in a circle. If this, then this, and it just keeps going on. So sometimes I think cleaner and shorter and more succinct for some of the
It's
policies.
funny. I
was
became
better, too.
a middle school principal for the first time in 2010, and in 2010 that was when the boom of BYOD hit. Now that I look back on it historically, the reason schools in Massachusetts particularly started to leverage BYOD, the bring your own device concept, was because school districts couldn't afford or they hadn't figured out how to put a device in every child's hands. So we basically said, if you own it, bring it, and we'll find a way to let it happen. And then now, if I had 500 kids in school, 400 could carry based on their family situation. I only have to buy 100 other alternative devices. Then the world shifted. Chromebooks exploded. They're super cheap. Districts can hand a kid a device for digital learning. We actually don't need to leverage the fact that your family has a phone anymore. So things have just changed now, and that's and now there's a lot of brain research about what the device does to all of us if we're on it for 15 hours a day. And it's not just the phone, quite honestly. It's that device, and it's the iPad. It's every device. The phone's just getting a bad rap, generally speaking, compared to other devices, but it's all devices. So I do think in this particular district, as well as the districts across the Commonwealth, that the phone itself needs to be less of the concept of the conversation. It has to be about technology implementation.
I want to ask one last question here, which is we have one more section that we still need to go through. What does that section address? I believe it's, I think we've done instruction, and I think what we're doing is students. Is that right?
Yep.
Is that what's left?
That is what's left, yeah.
So when I think about access to digital resources in instruction, I think we're talking in part about access to school district-owned technology. And so I wonder, are we still coming to the policies that deal with students?
Mm-hmm.
Student behavior, student discipline. And I don't know, I haven't previewed it yet. Will we stumble across things like cell phone procedures and policies in that last section?
I don't know, probably not.
Okay,
Probably not.
okay.
Probably not.
It's not still coming.
No, I don't think
Okay.
so. No. I mean, it's kind of funny. I don't want to keep belaboring this, but when you talk about discipline, I joke that in my day and age, the technology that kids misused was a Sharpie, right? So when you deal with restorative practices or discipline in schools, you're trying to change the behavior. Kids still, 7th grade boys still misbehave like 7th grade boys did 30 years ago. The tool of misbehavior has changed. We didn't ban Sharpies when I was a kid. We taught
the
kids how to
way
use them
in-
correctly.
The way in which it affects everyone around you has definitely changed.
Yeah, as it will, in 10 years from now, it'll be iterative again. So I want to make sure this digital resources has to recognize that we're living in the 21st century, teaching in the 21st century, and prepping kids for a technological world without ruining the culture of the school. I think the high school's done a really nice job this year of trying to blend that balance between technology. And Miss Rose is coming to 2 more meetings this year too, so it'd be interesting to see. I think she is giving an SEL presentation to us in one of these upcoming meetings. I would suspect that part of the SEL will be to talk about the changes she's made.
So based on your Yellow Brick Road thing that you were doing, are there any changes? Like I thought that you said it pointed people toward the I. So does it not need to point people to the I now, to section I, because there is nothing in section I?
Well, there's an acceptable use of digital resources and technology integration,
Okay.
and a mobile device counts for both of those.
This policy, IJNDC, points people to policy JICJ, and I didn't see a section J.
Because that's the last one that we
Got it.
have not
So
yet
it's
gone
not up
through.
there yet,
That's
and
what I
not
think I'm
even in
trying
our-
to say.
Got
We've
it.
got another section that's coming, and so we're
Even see it
that's
in
right.
our-
So we are inadvertently
We haven't done it.
pushing you to a section that you don't have yet. And so I think when we get that last section, then maybe that'll be the end of that winding road.
Oh, that's where it's going.
I think
just
that's
couldn't
what's
find
going to
the
happen.
end.
And it's been this process where you look at a policy and you say you have to set this one aside until you get to that section, and then it's like in some cases we looked at the first part last year and the second part this year, and then we're still waiting to get to the very last section, which is students, which is where the rubber's going to meet the road, I think, for some of these things.
Okay, anything else? Let's see.
Just a motion whenever everybody's ready.
No, I'm just checking to make sure I had no others, no other yellow sticky notes that had to come up tonight. Okay.
I know there's a reason
we didn't just
drop it.
No, you're right.
Okay. At this point, can I have a motion to accept these clean versions of the presented policies as first read?
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Okay. Does the Communication and Advocacy Subcommittee have an update?
I think our update is quite debrief, which is that we have a meeting coming up. The purpose is to debrief in the loop, to think about how this first one went, to think about when the second one should go, what the content should be, what did we learn from the first time around, and what's the implication for the next one.
Just related to that, I had sent Tony Bent a thank you card on behalf of the full committee, and I mailed a copy of In the Loop to his house just to show him what he had done to us, and to really thank him for supporting the committee's efforts and kind of giving us a model. And he applauded us and wanted me to let you know that he was really impressed by the first edition and hopes that we can maintain momentum, was, I think, his quote. So.
I continue to have people walk up to me, like it's getting warm outside and I'm out in the yard raking, and people will walk right up and say, that In the Loop, that thing was really great. Not to toot our own horn, but I think the feedback has been pretty positive. Have you gotten more feedback at your end? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great.
Does the Wellness Committee have an update?
We sure do. So we met, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago now, and we had talked, I think I talked last time about that we were looking into how to plan a community event, which I thought was great because it kind of works into our overall goal of communication and community engagement. So it is going to be on Saturday, May 10th from 10 to 1, and it's called the Community Day of Play. So it's going to be, we hope in the future to maybe do like a broader sort of a wellness fair, but we decided to sort of start with this Day of Play, and that's play for everybody. It's not just for kids, it's for everyone in the community. We hope to have pickleball clinics and yoga and art activities, and maybe have some community partners like the Cape Museum, the Open Door, Treetop Yoga, Magma, all these different people there to just kind of have lots of different fun events and to bring people in to our campuses and kind of see all the different things that are going on. So look for more of that, and we hope everyone can make it.
And so excited to have that committee have like a tangible thing,
Yes,
right?
it's been great.
Not just to say we have the committee to check the box and bring it back in Massachusetts because we have to, but that there's going to be end results and some outcomes that are really positive for the community. So I thank you for doing that. I think that's super important.
That sounds like a great thing. And I think any unfinished business at this time?
None.
Okay. So then we move down to the superintendent goals update.
So I tried to make this as easy to navigate as possible for everybody. So you'll tell me, I guess, if I did. Let me I have a lot of tabs open, so give me 1 second. Okay. So in your drive, you should have my updated goals report, Q3 update. And so what I've done is I've given you the copy of my original goal and then a box on each page with the progress update. Some are hyperlinked and some are narratives. So if you don't mind, I'll just step you through each one tonight, have a conversation about them. Would love feedback about either the format or about how it's presented now. And then after this meeting, we'll have a conversation about next steps that follow this presentation. So on the first goal, really the progress evidence, I'm trying to make this as big as I can for everybody. The progress evidence is the completion of the approved SDI, and that instead of giving you a giant end of year SDI summary, which I think was historically done in the past, the feedback from this committee last year was please chunk the presentations, and we've tried to do that. And in upcoming agendas, you'll see 2 more nights of chunked presentations from faculty members, students, and administrators. And so I just tried to give us a historical overview so that people could remember how we've hit them. And I chunked it by priority section in the SDI, just so if you're sort of keeping tabs of the SDI, you could see how we're trying to hit all of the priorities by the end of the year, just to show you how we're doing so far. We have upcoming presentations on MTSS, the instructional coach model, our current curriculum review cycle. So instead of just talking about the fact that we have one, Jody's going to come and review what we've done this year from a curriculum standpoint, and then Amy will give a professional development update. So by the end of the year, we should have hit all of those buckets publicly with the school committee to have conversations. The second one is kind of the high-value work. So happy that we successfully negotiated the RESA contract. Really happy that we're one section away from completing the school committee policy manual review. A lot of work around communication. The district website, I can't acknowledge principals, administrators, Mike Montgomery, Amanda Ogier. I'm trying to think of who else. I mean, there's a team of people who really put together everything on the website. I'm really proud of the website. I think it's in good shape and it is timely. And now I think we've fallen into a pretty good groove of every 3 or 4 weeks making sure if we haven't done anything in real time that we've at least hit the pause button and to try to clean up some of the old news or take out some of the old things. And we know we still have some work to do on the back end, but we do believe it's one-stop shopping and it's a pretty solid representation of who we are. So many organizations, particularly school districts, they don't get a refresh. And it just kind of sits stagnant with old letters and old information and doesn't reflect well on us. So we've been really focusing on that. Principals continue to talk about their updates and sending out the Friday information. We've talked about making sure those are not just laundry lists, but really try to get some more pictures of kids, some more celebratory messages. I recognize as a recovering principal that's a tough ask to end the week that way. But I think between them and their admin assistants, they're doing a nice job trying to kind of keep that happening. I will continue to focus triannually sending my updates out. From a bigger picture standpoint, they happen to hit at the same time as In the Loop next year, so I'll look at my timing a little better now that we have In the Loop. I think we're going to have 3 times a year pretty prescriptively, so I'll kind of slide my 3 s'mores in between the 3 loops. So there'll be 3 big In the Loops, 3 from me, and then every Friday from the principals. Communication and Advocacy Subcommittee has been really working hard. I think that's a great addition. Principal Family Partnership Series has been really well received. We've done it virtually and face-to-face so far. There's a 3rd one coming up soon, and I know that both principals will be coming to you within the next couple of meetings to kind of give you a commercial on how those have gone. We've already talked about In the Loop. We have really increased our communication through the Gloucester Daily Times. I think most of us have noticed that. That has been purposeful. We've done a couple things. One, we've been more communicative with the reporter who covers us. 2, Amanda had outreached on behalf of the district directly, I believe, to the publisher. And Jody has worked with the publisher as well to make sure that we have permission to submit our own articles, and that was not something the district had been doing in the past. So if we feel like something, I believe we just did this with the art show. That was the biggest one we got out there. We didn't think In the Loop. We didn't think In the Loop was going to hit on time, right, before the art show, and even though it made sense to us to do it there, it wasn't going to get the public in. And we did hear from the art department that people walked in the first night and said the only reason they even knew about it was because they saw it in the Times. So we'll continue to leverage that partnership as well. And then from a budgeting standpoint, I think we've done plenty of work, and I don't have to belabor the efforts that we've made there. This is my 3rd year of the induction program. Last year, I think there was a question about how do we know what you're doing or how do we have proof. So Chris McGrath graciously provided you with a progress update memo that you can click on and read.
Do you ever finish being inducted?
This is the state requires 3 years. This is my 3rd year. I don't know. To be fair, I don't know if you're ever done being inducted, but formally, yes, I will not have a coach after this year, and I will not be in the program anymore. So I'm sure there'll be something else on my plate. So I have a meeting with Chris on Thursday, but she did put a nice update together for you to take a look at. And then on the professional growth side, I just wanted to give you a look at all the work that I'm doing. I continue to be a member of the Professional Development Committee for the state organization, mostly working on approving the RFPs and reviewing them for the Summer Institute, working on the selection of keynote speakers, reviewing the vendors, planning logistics, hosting, and then here's the list of attendant conferences this year. Like many of our colleagues, we have shifted half of our PD this year has been teacher designed or internally designed PD. There's a lot of research around teachers teaching teachers and the benefit of leveraging us as professional teachers and educators. So I put together a professional development cycle called Purposeful and Effective Grading. It went over really well to the point where the people who were in that session gave me a suggestion that they would like me to develop that much more broadly so that that could be a huge focus area for us as a district, K to 12 next year. So then I continue to work for Southern New Hampshire University as an adjunct professor. There I have designed and taught applied research for the past couple of years. I've served as on comprehensive exam committees. I've served as a dissertation chair and a member over the past year. I wrote and facilitated what they call a doc talk called Navigating APA. And so I've become the APA guy in that program. I also designed and facilitated a faculty roundtable around recognizing and responding to imposter syndrome. And that's something we talk about with the leadership team here. And we talk about it with 8th graders, and we talk about it with seniors, so that there's a common thread around that that we do in a lot of different ways. I'm currently redesigning a leadership course for the university, and my connection to the university, as long as things go well, is really going to benefit us in a unique way that we're going to try to take that course in purposeful and effective grading and turn it into a graduate program. So I'm trying to come up with an articulated agreement with the university that will allow us to develop in-house graduate courses for teachers, so they can either take them for licensure renewal, or if they wanted to pay for credits, they could get SNHU grad credit and take them right here and have them being taught by administrators or teachers in the district. So my hope is to kind of strengthen that partnership up over the next 6 months or so. So that is my goals update. If you have thoughts, comments, questions, I'll happily take them. And then after this meeting, we'll talk about what the next steps are from this.
Any questions at this point? Okay. Do we have any finance tonight?
No, we don't. I would just remind everyone that town meeting is coming up on Saturday, April 5th. And
That's right.
for everyone in the town to hopefully participate.
Right, especially school committee. It is, it's a long meeting, but it is fascinating, so. So at this time, we do have a need for executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel. We'll adjourn from the executive session and we will not reconvene to open session. So this requires a roll call vote. So Riley, yes?
Lorenz, yes?
Altieri, yes.
Oaks, yes.
Delisi, yes.